Progress Ohio, who will speak on issues that are impacting his work. Tabitha Woodruff of Ohio PIRG, or Public Interest Research Group, will speak about how it affects that organization. And Cliff Arnebeck, an attorney here in Ohio, much involved in many issues relating to corporate power, will speak to us about Common Cause and its view of this issue. Victoria Parks, our musician, will give us, in the course of the next period of time, a couple of songs that are very relevant to corporate personhood and which we hope you'll enjoy. Bob Fitrakis, who I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, know, of the Green Party and the Free Press, I hope will be here at the appropriate time to present to us. We got a call a little while ago that Teresa Mills, who represents the anti-fracking community, had a serious illness in her family and will not be able to join us. But after that, we will have an open mic period giving any of you the opportunity to both ask questions and make any additional statements that you would care to make about this issue to get on the record. At that point then, we'll move to the State House. We expected to leave here about 12:30 with signs and banners and posters. We must obey traffic signals and stay together. And once there, we'll gather on the west side with an amplification system to continue to bring our story to passers-by with literature, with the petitions, and with people speaking, perhaps music if it's not too cold, and opportunity for an open mic again. At that point, we were thinking we might come back here, but we'll see about that. If there's an interest and people there would like to come back and discuss and sort of debrief, we can then, thanks to Brian and Progress Ohio, come back and sit here for a while and talk about next steps and where we're all going. So, thank you for your patience and your attention. Without further ado, first, it's delightful to see you all here. It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Rothenberg of Progress Ohio.
Good afternoon, or good morning. We're not at afternoon. Perhaps no Supreme Court decision has impacted the United States nearly as much as this decision in 2010. For those who aren't familiar with the decision to allow corporations essentially person status led to an election that was increasingly negative and nasty, with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars spent on television ads. Many of you have recognized or heard of the super PACs. What you didn't recognize was the ability, because of this law, to start to influence politics at a much greater level through television ads, combined with their increasing influence because of the way in which this law impacts a corporation's ability to communicate, the same as you and I as individuals in the United States. There are very few issues in which this country is not impacted by this decision. Move to amend includes things like the gun issue. The NRA is supported in large part by gun manufacturing entities. We now have a debate in this country over reasonable, not getting rid of guns, reasonable standards when it comes to guns. And you must ask yourself why we don't have background checks, and you must ask yourself why we don't have reasonable restrictions. Why it is harder to get cold medicine in this country than it is to buy a gun. And there is one simple answer for that. The influence of corporations in this nation. Move to amend. You must ask yourself, as you look at what's happening in Washington, why we are having a debate about a fiscal cliff. Why we are talking about tax cuts for millionaires and ignoring loopholes that millionaires get because of the influence that they have over the system, because of the corporate entities that this law, Citizens United, has allowed in this country. Move to amend. You must ask yourself, why we are now talking about a standoff in Washington in which some people in Congress want to risk the credit of our nation in order to force cuts to Medicare, to Medicaid, to Social Security, because of the influence of corporations. You must ask yourself, as you look at policies around the United States, why it is that we can't have decent, simple disclosure of political donations. Disclosure when it comes to corporate welfare. Jobs Ohio, where they formed a corporation that will get hundreds of million dollars of state funds if I don't succeed in getting the Supreme Court to ever make a decision.
Good for you.
With no disclosure, none, as to how those monies are being spent and whether jobs are being created. It is all coming from the fundamental basis of the Citizens United decision. Move to it. The fact of the matter is, in the state of Ohio and in our nation, we are struggling right now, struggling mightily with the impact of a 3-year-old Supreme Court decision, which gave corporations the same legal status as people. And because of that, we are faced as a nation with trying to balance the rights of individuals versus the rights of large corporations. Even in the face, like in the gun issue, of overwhelming polling from a Republican pollster that even shows that 70% of NRA members themselves on that issue are okay with background checks, do not need and are okay with limiting clips. You must ask yourself why politicians would ignore polls in the face of overwhelming evidence and outcry after what happened in Connecticut. And it leads you back to the same path. Corporations and their influence and lack of disclosure. Now, to say this does not mean, and I want to be very clear, that we're against jobs. Oh, no, 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 no. We're for jobs. People need jobs. But how much profit do corporations need? How much profit do corporations need to put in Wall Street? And at its core, the lack of recovery in this recession comes from one simple principle that came out of Citizens United around the same time of the economic collapse. And that is that we have a Wall Street recovery, not a consumer recovery. And why would we have a Wall Street recovery? Because we have a country right now that is putting excessive profit into the hands of a few, dwindling down the spending of the middle class, that has put us into a spiral economically. And it all comes back to one issue: corporate influence over individual power. So on this 3rd anniversary, let us remember that there are citizen movements, that there is a groundswell growing, that there are actually ballot issues at the local level to change this. And at its core, let us also remember that this is a country made up of people, and that no matter how the Supreme Court defines us, people are individuals. They are not corporations. And in the end, it is not about if, but when this court case will be over.